Oh,
All right,
Taylor got there.
I'm recording. So, welcome everyone. Today is Thursday, August 1st, 2019, for the Helm developer call. This is kind of like a community meeting to go through any kind of things that the core maintainers are going through for the week. So, we do start off with announcements that have happened over the last week. Then we go into stand-ups with the core maintainers or anyone else who wants to join and give a stand-up from the community. And then we go into discussion items for the day, and then we finish off with assignments for the next week. So the notes, I see that Taylor's already posted them, but those are the notes for the meeting. So if you want to join along, there's that. So first off, we have one announcement, and it's from me, and that is the Helm 2.14.3 release was out. So there was one fix that was implemented for this patch. So if you want to go and take a look at that, there's the release notes available. So that's out. Is there any other announcements that we want to go through today? All right, silence means no. So stand up. I will not pass off to myself first, so I will pass off to Adnan.
Oh, hey everyone. Yeah, I've been kind of away for a while, mostly because I can't make this meeting. I usually have a conflict, but today I was able to, so I thought I'd step in and say hello. Other than that, not really anything to report. There was a thread about the charts stable repo and that going forward with Helm 3 that I commented on as well. And yeah, I guess that's more in the purview of the charts team. But if you have any input on that, I think it'd be good to hear that.
Is there a link to that?
That's the thread on the mailing list, right?
Yeah, it's a thread on the mailing list. You could probably find a link to that.
I'll find it.
Yep. Oh, thanks, Matt. But good to see everyone again. And I will pass it on to Martin.
Hi, folks. So this last week, I started looking at the V2 API work. So we want to upgrade the API version because some of the charts structure is going to change in V3. So I'm through some of that at the moment. Probably have there's one PR waiting on a review. So probably about two review PRs after that, one for V2, and then around the documentation, which there could be quite a bit of change in that. So I'll see when I get through that. Apart from that, I enabled test style, checking for the test style in the circle build, because we were getting a lot of breakages on that. So that's in there. And at last I got back to the migration as well. So I'm hoping if I keep at this pace, probably have it by tomorrow evening, a proposal on that. Yeah, we might want to have a chat around too, because it potentially has changes in and around the SDK. So we can see on that. And that's all for me. So I'll hand over to Matt Farina.
All right. So I think the first thing already came out, which was removing the stable repository from Helm v3 as being automatically added. We'll have to do some other things in order to work on the user experience following up with it. Some of this was on the mailing list and I need to go back and reply to it. But that's the first bit. Because the stable repository, for those of you who don't already know, it's hosted in Google Cloud in a bucket, and so is the incubator repository in another bucket, and those are owned by, they're managed by Google. Now, Google Cloud does not let you move buckets between projects, so there's no way for us to take this out of Google and say move it to the CNCF while continuing to use those domains. Now, there's obviously lots of routes you could do if you had to move the stable repository to another location, especially in v3, but then we run into two other problems. One is Google Cloud isn't available in China, and we're getting this massive influx of Chinese folks. In fact, we're working on, there's now a Chinese mirror to the Helm Hub, which makes charts and the images and everything work in China by making those that aren't accessible moved over, dealing with dependencies and all that stuff. Then there is, the other thing is the charts repo has grown so large, it is becoming virtually unmaintainable. We've tried adding owners files and doing all kinds of things. it isn't working that well. We need other avenues to expose those. And so we are working on bringing in things like Helm Hub search right into the Helm client. And so some of that's going on. So the other thing that I worked on is I uploaded like a month and a half of Helm calls to YouTube because we've kind of gotten lax in uploading them. There's an issue about doing PGP verification of releases. Everything is PGP signed these days. All the releases are, for at least for Helm v2, all the stable releases. And so we're working on a process, and that's included adding a keys file that's got keys. And right now I think mine and Martin's are in there. We can start circulating them more once Mr. Fisher's are in there because he's done numerous releases.
I just did the PR this morning, so.
Oh, fantastic. So hopefully that'll be there soon. There is, these are now pushed into get.helm.sh, so get.helm.sh/keys, all uppercase, will actually get you the keys file for verification processes. Doing all this stuff has now been documented in the releaser notes as well. And so the next stuff is actually going to be making it easy for people to do on the backside of releasing and checking. So I'm working on that because there have been requests to make this possible. And so we're getting everything all into those good places. And that's what I've been working on. And so with that, I'll hand it off to, how about Taylor? And thanks whoever took notes while I was chatting to put my stuff in.
No problem.
So I've been working on a couple things this week. I was working on 2.14.3 with Fisher. That was the CRD change. I'm going to have to actually port that this next week to Helm 3 to make sure it's there. I did a big refactor of the kube client, and that's been merged as well, and then finished a PR for the three-way merge patching for Helm 3. I have that in the discussion item for later because Fisher and I have a few questions we wanted to make sure were posed out to the wider community. And then I think that's it. I'm just working on a couple other ports of features that were in Helm 2 that aren't in Helm 3 yet, or fixes. And that's what I'll be working on this week. So let's pass it off to Josh.
Hey, a little busy this week, not much to add. A little chart museum stuff, trying to get all of the OCI related tasks ready for beta. So I've been having some conversations with people, but I'm gonna bring it up in discussion. Scott?
Mainly what I did, am I on mute? No. Mainly what I did this past week is dug back into the idea to have a GitHub app for chart releaser. It's not done yet, but it's starting to look okay, and I'll be sharing that with those who care soon. Oh my gosh. Wait, so who else is on the list of?
I think Jacob and Mr. Fisher are left, and maybe somebody else who joined that I haven't.
Okay, how about Jacob?
Oh, Jacob, you're muted, unfortunately.
It might be a hardware mute or a mic because it says he's unmuted.
Okay, so in the meantime, while Jacob's trying to figure that out, I'll go through my stand-up quickly. So what I've been doing this week, Taylor and I have been working on pairing on a couple of Helm 3 issues, as well as Adam when he's available. We basically have been working on the design for the three-way merge patch that has been long requested for a long time. So we actually programmed on that one and got it in there, so the PR is available. And now it's basically at a point where we need to go through and make sure that we have the documentation and make sure that we have the messaging right, and just like understanding the behavior behind the three-way merge patch versus the two-way merge patch and why this is an improvement over the existing system, so other people can understand the use cases that we're trying to solve with that one. So it's like a small-ish change, but also it impacts a lot of use cases around upgrades. So it's a fantastic change, I think. Okay, Jacob, you've got everything set up?
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Good. I've been working on the initial changes needed to support the chart testing proposal for Helm 3. So what I've got right now is a pull request that supports defining tests as jobs and contains all of the hook execution logic in a single function, which actually was a refactor that was already done very recently, but it's working, and it also adds generic tracking of hook executions for any hooks. So we'll be able to report on that from the CLI as well in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, I've taken an initial look at that one, and I'm planning on taking another deeper dive on that either today or tomorrow, just to make sure that we have those use cases and we can test that one extensively. So
cool. And as a follow-up to that PR, once that's merged, I'll add documentation to Helm dub.
Awesome. So that's all that's on the notes here. Does anyone else want to give a quick stand up before we go into discussion items? Silence. All right. So first thing on the discussion list from Matt Farina is the Helm v2 support window once v3 is out. Do you want to kick off that discussion?
Sure. This actually was born out of a comment Bridget made last time when I suggested that we would support Helm v2 for 6 months after v3 came out. And she commented about, will people have actually migrated over by then? And so I wanted to entertain a public conversation, something that I'll carry out to the list after this on that support window, just so we're very open about it. Yeah, Bridget commented enterprises. But what is a good time range? I think 6 months is what's very, very typical. If I remember right, it's been a while, and that was from my enterprise days of, well, I guess I'm still in enterprise working at Samsung, but that was where when we were paying attention to those things with products, 6 months was acceptable for some of the things that we had to do for APIs and stuff like that. But what do we think would be acceptable once Helm v3 is out, and why?
Yeah, from my personal perspective, I think at least an understanding would be, I think the general practice is 6 months for a migration, and it's 12 months for a deprecation, as in like there's no migration path afterwards. It's move off to another platform or to another project. So to me, it sounds like 6 months is a reasonable support window. But Bridget, do you have? I see your hands raised.
The concern that I have is the timeline we're looking at. If our GA is coming about 6 months before, say, retail holiday, that's not going to be a window that a lot of, whether it's tax season, year end, retail holiday, I kind of feel like the September, October, November timeframe, expecting people to bring an exciting new project into their scheduled things they plan on implementing is like a little, it could be a little dire just for the big enterprise customers that are using it. So I would imagine that what you're describing, like say, hey, 6 months and then maybe a year for it'll be impossible to move, just in case they're looking at their schedule and going, I can't even start this for 5 months, and putting it into full production within 6 sounds impossible. I'm worried about, and maybe you can shed more light on the actual install base, but I seem to talk to people at conferences who, I was just on a call last week with like a healthcare company that was using, Helm and hadn't really even thought about Helm 3 yet. So
that's a wonderful point, because if we go out, say, in September, and then if you think 6 months after that, you're literally tax season and you've gone through the holiday season. And so that could be a problem. And then so we may have to look at a full year. Part of this is also, how long do we keep the stable repository around for? And how long do we have to worry about Tiller in its current location? It's hosting through Google. And so we're probably going to be limited by some of that. But you make a fantastic point. And so maybe we say something along the lines of, for the next 6 months, we will still have bug fix releases, and then the following 6 months we'll have security releases, right? And then after that, the download of Tiller may no longer be available. That will be actually at Google's discretion probably, from the same location. And we will probably back it up somewhere else so it can be gotten, but it'll be more difficult to get to those because the standard locations won't be available anymore, and the stable charts repo may no longer be available after a year. Does that sound like an acceptable thing to do? We'll still have probably backups for people who need it or alternatives, but like saying Helm init and stable, install may just stop working after a year. Do you think that would be acceptable?
Yeah. Bug fix releases for 6 months and then going just to only security releases for another 6 months. So it would be a 12-month time frame, but our commitment to the post 6 month time frame would be much less or much lower, and that would give people a very long migration window to move forward. So I think that would be a good way to go forward.
And then you'll probably end up losing the ability to download Tiller and the stable charts and incubator charts from the same locations you have been in the past. That's another gotcha in there of that may happen. And I think we should still should still make an effort to make Tiller available somewhere for people who need it. They're just gonna have to specify the location. Those kinds of things. And the stable and incubator charts, hopefully there'll be alternative paths by then, but I don't know what that path forward would be. Okay, that was it for this.
Can I just, one quick point? Would it be better put a proposal out of what the deprecation policy is going to be? So it sounds very, very reasonable if I'm looking at one side of an open source point of view. But if I go into an enterprise point of view, they think more in years than in months. So maybe, would it be better get a proposal out there and get some feedback on that first, and then find a compromise in between it then?
I mean, my personal thoughts on this one with that, Martin, is like 1 year is a pretty good time frame, and this is an open source project. This is not an enterprise. Like, people use it in the enterprise, and that's what we're targeting. But this is still an open source project, and like, we're not being paid by enterprises to support it. We're not. So I think 1 year is pretty good. Is a pretty good time frame, and I think, like Bridget said, publishing that schedule is the biggest thing we can do, because then it's like, okay, no, we've said what this is. And I mean, in the absolute worst case scenario for somebody, it's not like the code is gone. You can still build it. It's just that we're moving on to making sure that we can keep supporting Helm 3 properly.
And Martin, a certain amount of this is the fact that we are going to lose the download locations that are tightly coupled to Google because we can't move them elsewhere easily. And that's actually going to create problems for us, especially for some of the legacy stuff. If somebody's using an older version of Helm, say 2.7, 2.8, its Tiller location is hard-coded to a Google Cloud URL that is hosted by Google, not the CNCF. And there's nothing we can do to fix that. And that right there is going to present issues there, because we've been approached about when will this go away so they stop paying for it. Because it's not a CNCF, it's a Google thing, from all the way back when Helm was part of Kubernetes as a Google project. And so some of these things, we've been approached on it. And so we need real timetables around not doing that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I suppose we'll just get it out there. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just a time check. So we've got 8 minutes before the end of the meeting, so I'd like to move on to other discussion items. Do we have all the action items that we need to have in here, Matt?
I think so. I'll be documenting them now.
Perfect. Okay. So next one, Josh, I'm assuming that this was from you, which is the 3.0 beta OCI tasks. Do you want to jump on that?
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. So trying to get stuff in a stable-ish before beta comes out. One has been pretty much discussed, which is the OCI layout. There's another spec that OCI has, which is how blobs are stored on the file system. So I had come up with a custom way to store charts that's in Alpha 2. And so I'm talking with the original author of the Auras library And I think we'll get that out early next week. There's a second one that I let fall through though, which is finalizing on the layers that are stored in the registry. So right now there's 2 layers. If you look in the notes, I put both the links to these if you want to check it out. There's 2 layers, one which is the entire chart is a tarball minus chart YAML, and then a second layer for chart YAML called meta. And a few people I'm talking to from the Harbor project don't like the idea, and I kind of agree, of putting meta as a layer, instead putting metadata, which is all the stuff in chart YAML, in the annotations of the manifest in the registry. Additionally, we have to make a decision on, now are we then down to a single layer, which is just a tarball, or do we want to break out to a layer for notes.txt, a layer for README, a different layer type for all the different templates, a layer for tests, which is a little bit more work, and we're not really saving a lot of bandwidth with that, but seems like the right way to do it. So just looking for any opinions on that. We can also version these things and start with tarball and then go to multi-layer later on.
Yeah, I think the nice thing with OCI is that we could change the metadata format in the future, and as long as Helm understands both of those formats, then we can fetch and pull those, whichever version that we're using for that thing. And then older versions of Helm will not necessarily be able to support the newer version, but we can move forward with that and add legacy support for those different things. So the nice thing is that we don't have to break backwards compatibility in those cases. We can continue to support the older legacy formats. So whatever decision seems to be the right path forward, then let's go with that. But we don't have to make a decision necessarily now, I don't think.
I do kind of want to drop that meta layer though.
Okay.
Right, I mean, it just seems like meta should be more meta versus blob.
Farina?
Yeah.
I was going to say this impacts signing of charts. And so we need to make sure all of this works well with signing charts and pushing and pulling them from locations. I realize we don't have probably enough use of signing, but it is a feature and people are using it. So however this works, I mean, with the tarball right now, we can sign it and we can even push that signing, the provenance file, to the repository right alongside of it, because it's signing the tarball layer. If we start breaking things up, then that changes the way signing and die adjust versus it is going to work, right? And so that needs to be worked out as well. Not suggesting we do it here, I'm just bringing that up.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't think in the OCI stuff we've actually addressed or signature verification or uploading the signatures, and I think that's been a long-standing discussion on the OCI stuff, right?
Yeah. So I have some free time Monday before DevOps Days Minneapolis. If someone wants to, kind of plan around this. So yeah.
I may be able to sit down with you on Monday and chat about it.
All right, I'll try to put some on the calendar.
Thanks. All right, Alex, you have an Argo CD demo?
Hi, Matt. Do you have enough time, do you think?
I think so. Yeah, if people aren't able to come along, then other people can drop off. But I think it'd be good to have a demonstration and just to kind of show, and if you want to do a discussion on that. Because I know you had a couple of things you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if people are familiar with Argo CD. Let me just share my screen here. And now you can all see yourselves. Lovely. So my name is Alex. I work at Intuit in Mountain View, and I work on Argo CD and Argo Project, which is a group of applications designed to make it easier to work with Kubernetes. One is Argo Workflows, which is a workflow engine. We've got Argo Events, which is an event-based system, and Argo CD, which is GitOps continuous delivery, and that's really the thing that I focus on mostly. Just to kind of summarize what GitOps is basically you define an application, which is a group of Kubernetes resources in some files in Git, and then Argo CD, its job is to get those files from Git and make sure that what you've got in your Kubernetes clusters matches what you have in Git. And the way that it does that is effectively it checks out the code from Git every 3 minutes. It then runs a tool such as Helm or Customize on it to produce a set of manifests. So it basically runs Helm template, and then and that produces a set of manifests, and then it looks in the cluster for the manifests that are labeled with the application name, and then compares the two of them. And if they're different, it considers that application out of sync, and if they are the same, it's considered in sync. And if the application is out of sync, it might be an image tag change, or it might be something more fundamental. And then you can run a sync process, which basically updates that application. So I'm just going to show a little bit of a demo here. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So this is the user interface. Now there is, this is the user interface. There's also a CLI tool. The CLI tool's purpose is really for automation. So often you might use it to trigger a sync process after you've done a Git commit as part of a Jenkins pipeline. So you build your application in Jenkins, update the tag on the manifest, so then trigger Argo CD to deploy that to an environment. And what you do is you go in here, you configure your repository to include your repository and any clusters, and it manages multi-cluster as well, so you can have one or many clusters. And then you would just go into your repository and say, create an application, give it a name, give it a project, which is basically a team, and I'll just use the guestbook one. Choose your cluster, choose a namespace, and if the demo cards are with me, the application will just kind of appear in the user interface. I can click in and I can see that my application is out of sync. And it's telling me here that in this view that I need to basically apply these manifests to create the application. So I click on sync, and then it'll basically start the synchronization process, and you'll see that it basically creates the application, and it's created me a service and a pod. And then it's telling me a little bit of information in the user interface, telling me, what have I synchronized to, and what am I out of sync from. So that's kind of the tool in a nutshell, really. There's a whole bunch of other features I'm not even talking about, things like RBAC, auditing and logging, and various other things, and different ways of triggering, different Git repositories we support, and different tools we support. But what I'm here really to talk about today is the fact that in our next release, our V1.3 release, we've had a lot of feedback from developers in the community, and one of our biggest customers. And if we look at the upvoted issues here in the repository, they're all very much Helm related. People want better support for Helm. So we use Helm as a tool, but it's a bit of a primitive integration. For example, we don't really support any of the hooks. We just kind of ignore them. We don't. And we don't support it as a first-class citizen. So you always have to create a Git repository that kind of references a Helm repository. So what we actually want to do is, bring that. You just click on Git repository and you choose the chart from the user interface, and then you click sync. Okay, sounds fine, right? The challenge we have is that we're experts in GitOps and Argo CD and that area, and we're not Helm experts. We don't really have a fundamental understanding of how people go about using Helm, what kind of features are really important for them, and therefore what features we need to think about supporting, and what kind of gotchas and edge cases there are in Helm as well. And so what I'm asking here, and what I've spoken to Matt a bit about a couple of days ago, is how can we get help, and how can we kind of work together to make sure that we produce a really good support for Helm in the community, and how can we get advice from you and you guys to do that? So that's kind of what I'm here to say, I guess. Any questions? Absolute silence. Sometimes that's a good thing.
Thanks, Alex. So I guess the question was, and I wanted to bring this back to the group, kind of is, what were so you were interested in kind of going through what are the use cases that Helm users are kind of mostly interested in the application development lifecycle of a chart, and how that kind of relates and maps to a GitOps project. I would be really curious to hear if there are other GitOps related projects similar to Argo that perhaps is using Helm and how they're integrating with that stuff, or if it's the similar pattern where they're doing a Helm template and doing the things. And I see Farina has got a point raised.
I was just going to actually suggest Weaveworks Flux. I don't know if you've noticed, but Flux is looking to try to get themselves, they were the project that started a bunch of the GitHub stuff out of Weaveworks. They're looking to become part of the CNCF. They've actually moved their repo locations and names and things like that. But they have some sort of Helm integration, and they're doing GitOps as well. I'm not up on the latest, but that is another point of that in another project.
Yeah, I mean, we're familiar with Flux because they're probably the closest thing that we have to a competitor, if that makes any sense. The use cases are slightly different, but they're trying to do a lot of the same stuff that we're trying to do. So I'll take a closer look at their Helm integration, see where they are with that.
Yeah,
and I'm just pointing in that direction. I actually have no idea what it looks like these days.
That actually might be a good place to start taking a look at too, because they might have been ramping into the exact same problems which you might be coming into, which is support for hooks or different things that are available inside of the charts or the application lifecycle, and how they're trying to implement or support those, because I think this would be a cross-cutting problem across multiple different projects that are trying to integrate with Helm charts. The only other project that I might know that could be semi-similar might be like the Terraform project, or at least there's a Terraform Helm plugin which uses Helm charts and loads them and installs them into a cluster. And I'm not sure how that's done, whether they use the CLI or they use the SDK, but that might be another project that might be of interest to take a look at.
It kind of sounds like something that might be a good fit for the FDK. I don't know where that came from, SDK. And the thing that I've seen, I swear, I thought I saw something from Weave about them working on one with the Helm 3 alphas just as a prototype, but it could have been I just know I've seen a couple people working on them. So that might be something valuable as well, is to just go and on the Helm dev channel, see if there's anyone who's been working on like the Helm v3 stuff, because a lot of that might be a little bit easier if you're thinking about using it from like more of a client side instead of a CLI side, which probably could be easier. So that might be a good course of actions to go on there and ask and say like, hey, who's kind of prototyping stuff with alphas? Because I know there are people who are doing it.
Okay. Thank you. Is it so? Just use the Helm Slack to ask questions. Is that the kind of broad recommendation?
Yeah, I would get connections there, and then kind of we can. If you don't get any traction, I can try to dig around and see if I've have a thread somewhere buried in my inbox or something where I was talking to somebody or something like that, and see what I can do.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've started to see some people actually asking questions about development-related things or user-related things in the mailing list. Which can be helpful for when you're asking questions where half the community is offline because Slack is asynchronous. So that might also be a helpful way to go through those for the longer discussions where you're actually wanting to gather use cases and understand where people are coming from and how they're using Helm or different things like that.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, guys, thanks very much for these ideas.
No problem. So Taylor, you have the Helm 3-way merge thing. Do you want to push that to another week? Or
yeah, we can see if we need to talk about it next week. It could be merged by next week. But anyone on the call or seeing the call later, if you want to go take a look at it and give it a spin, let us know what you think. That'd be great.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, so we can bring that back as well to the PR. All right, so that's everything. Thank you everyone for coming along. Sorry it was a little bit later than usual, but thank you for staying along. Talk to you guys later.
Thanks.
Bye.